Hi everyone, and welcome to our channel, Football Stories. Here, we explore the incredible history of the beautiful game. So let's get started.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is probably one of the most consequential shifts in the entire history of global sports. We're connecting the dots between a thrilling, projected 2026 Champions League final, a bitter, long drawn-out 2021 club takeover, and a looming legal verdict that could literally change everything. You put all these together, and it's the ultimate power struggle in modern football. We're talking about traditional sporting frameworks colliding head-on with, well, unprecedented global wealth. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with a glimpse of the future, unpack the Newcastle takeover saga, look at where geopolitics and football collide, dive into Manchester City's reckoning, and finally ask the big question: are they just too big to punish? All right, Section 1, a glimpse of the future, looking ahead to the 2026 Champions League final. Imagine for a second it's May 30th, 2026. We're in Budapest. What we're looking at here is a projected scenario drawn from our sources, showing what happens when immense, state-backed wealth fully and completely integrates into the sport. In this hypothetical, Paris Saint-Germain, a club totally revolutionized by state-backed ownership, claims a historic back-to-back Champions League triumph against Arsenal. The match ends in a 1-1 draw after extra time, but check out these numbers. PSG utterly dominates the ball. They hold an overwhelming 72% possession, firing off 21 shots compared to Arsenal's 8, before eventually taking the victory 4-3 on penalties. Tracing the dramatic arc of this projected match, it's actually Arsenal who strikes first. Kai Havertz beats the keeper from a crazy tight angle just 6 minutes in. But, PSG's relentless pressure eventually pays off. Ousmane Dembélé converts a penalty in the 65th minute. So, through grueling extra time and right into the absolute sudden death pressure of a penalty shootout, PSG's incredibly deep and talented roster just cements their dominance, sealing the deal when Arsenal sends their final shot sailing over the crossbar. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast. On one side, you've got Paris Saint-Germain officially solidifying a modern European dynasty. They hypothetically add this 2026 trophy to their 2025 victory, making them the very first club to go back-to-back in the Champions League era since Real Madrid. On the flip side, you have Arsenal. They represent a much more traditional footballing institution, right? And here they face yet another agonizing heartbreak in a European final, echoing that devastating loss 20 years prior back in 2006. Really, it forces us to ask, is the playing field even level anymore? Moving on to Section 2, the Newcastle takeover saga, or testing the rules. To really understand how football authorities try to wrestle with these financial superpowers before they even step onto the pitch, we have to rewind a bit to 2020. The Premier League's primary defense mechanism is the owners and directors test. Historically, this rulebook framework was just used to make sure prospective owners had the actual cash to run a club and, well, weren't criminals. But it was about to be rigorously and controversially tested by a consortium trying to buy Newcastle United, pushing those rules to their absolute breaking point. So picture this. In April 2020, a massive £300 million bid is launched to buy the club from Mike Ashley. This consortium was heavily backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, the PIF, taking an 80% stake. This unprecedented bid set the stage for an explosive clash. For the very first time, a domestic football league was standing face-to-face with the staggering sovereign wealth of a global superpower. And let me tell you, neither side was willing to back down easily. Which brings us to Section 3, Geopolitics and Football Collision, the 18-month standoff. What followed wasn't just a simple business transaction. It was a full-blown geopolitical tug-of-war. Looking at the timeline here, you can clearly see the exhausting back and forth that defined this whole period. After the initial bid in April 2020, the consortium actually pulled out by July, citing impossible delays from the Premier League. The league was basically holding out, refusing to give a definitive yes or no. That stalemate led to a highly dramatic and very public legal tribunal in September 2021, which finally forced the issue and pushed the deal through in October 2021. Now, this standoff was driven by massive external pressures that were frankly way bigger than football. There was this intense piracy dispute involving the broadcaster BN Sports and an illegal streaming service called BOutQ, which got completely tangled up in bilateral tensions between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. On top of that, Amnesty International was raising loud concerns over alleged sport washing. And behind the scenes, The Premier League was facing intense lobbying from rival clubs who, according to our sources, were allegedly terrified of having to compete against this massive new financial juggernaut. Meanwhile, on the ground in Tyneside, the reality looked completely different. The numbers brilliantly illustrate the overwhelming desperation for investment at the club level. I mean, an incredible 97% of the Newcastle United Supporters Trust were in favor of the takeover. 97%. For the fans, all that geopolitical noise was entirely secondary to the promise of regional investment, heavy funding for their club, and finally escaping a really stagnant era of ownership. The whole saga finally reached its conclusion in October 2021, and it hinged entirely on this one specific statement. The Premier League announced they had received legally binding assurances separating the public investment fund from the Saudi state itself. Now, this legal distinction, whether you personally view it as a genuine firewall or just a convenient technicality, was the ultimate key that unlocked the boardroom door and finalized the takeover.
All right, Section 4, Manchester City's reckoning. The 115 charges.
So, having established how the league handles entry, how does it govern a state-backed superpower that is already inside the house, absolutely dominating the competition? 115. That massive number represents the total alleged financial breaches leveled by the Premier League against Manchester City. These charges span a 9-year period, from 2009 to 2018. Following a monumental independent commission hearing, the entire footballing world is currently just sitting in a holding pattern, waiting on what will be an absolutely historic, unprecedented independent verdict. Okay, let's look at the stakes here because they are staggering. This isn't just a slap on the wrist. If liability is found, the subsequent punishments could literally rewrite the entire hierarchy of English football. We are talking about severe points deductions, massive financial fines, potential relegation to the championship, or even total expulsion from the top flight. The scale of the punishment here is going to set the standard for decades to come.
And according to legal insiders cited in our sources, this multi-year holding pattern is finally nearing its explosive conclusion. Stefan Borson, a former financial advisor to City, points out that the independent commission is currently drafting its decision. His point is, despite the sheer complexity of reviewing 115 charges, the physical act of writing up a private arbitration ruling can only take so long, meaning a definitive resolution is expected very, very soon.
That brings us to Section 5, Too Big to Punish, the power struggle. This leads into what is probably the most pressing debate from our sources. If Manchester City is actually found guilty, is the Premier League genuinely capable of sanctioning its most successful modern franchise? Are they simply too big to punish? Former football scout Brian King captures a growing public cynicism here. He argues that the only true punishment would be relegation, but he voices a widespread belief that the league just doesn't have the institutional nerve to actually demote a global powerhouse. There's this lingering suspicion that City's immense global influence essentially renders them untouchable. The truly terrifying reality for regulators is that their traditional tools might just be completely broken. Experts argue that even a record-shattering financial penalty, say a ridiculous £500 million fine, would lose absolutely all of its deterrent value. When you deploy a fine like that against a club backed by virtually bottomless state-level wealth, it just becomes another routine operating expense, right? It ceases to be a genuine punishment. Yet, in the face of all this incredible external noise, City's leadership projects absolute calm and defiance. Chairman Khaldoun Mubarak has consistently maintained the club's innocence. His words here suggest a deep-seated belief within the Etihad boardroom that their formidable legal defense will see these charges dismissed entirely. They believe they are just biding their time until they're fully vindicated. So, as we look back from Paris Saint-Germain's projected back-to-back European dominance to the intense, protracted legal battles currently raging in English boardrooms, we really have to face a difficult reality. The scale of investment has fundamentally changed. So I'll leave you with this question to consider. Are the traditional regulations that govern the sport we love fundamentally obsolete in the face of modern global wealth? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time as we continue to break down the most fascinating topics in the world of sports.
That's all for today. Goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.